we are facing, installations that are now being shut down, bombed completely. The turnaround will take around 5 years for them just to be back in mint condition, for them to now continue, refining the oil. In the meantime, since this is a contractual agreement we had with Saudi and other interested entities as far as the import of oil is concerned, where do we stand? What will be the alternative from your own assessment?
It's very unfortunate, but before I answer that, let me just correct some impression that my good friend Rachel has said. The tragedy of any man is a failure to use his senses to perceive that which is around him, especially danger. The instinct for self-preservation is innate. It's built in you as a human being. Mm-hmm. And the moment you see what is happening in Slovenia, in Pakistan, and elsewhere, because of this Strait of Hormuz scenario, you have to shudder and ask, since we do not produce our own oil like Angola or Mozambique or Nigeria or Libya or Tunisia, what are our options? Because what we were told in Turkana is just a dead end. Or it's shrouded in this opaqueness that we have to question. Where do you take all that oil? And do you still mine oil? I mean, do you still extract oil? And what do you extract? How about our neighbor, Tanzania? Tanzania produces natural gas. Now let me use the example of Iran, Pakistan, and India as an example. That they had an agreement that there should be a gas pipeline flowing from Iran all the way up to India. So there was a joint venture that they should all contribute their portion of the stretch of the gas pipe. Iran did its own, right to the border with Pakistan. We know the politics that have been playing between India and Pakistan. That pipeline did not get constructed on the end of Pakistan and India. Today, they are regretting. That's a lesson that Kenya should have learned. We have cheap gas from Tanzania. What's happened? We have the dealer who is there getting into politics with the president here, buying a newspaper and such like, and shrouding the supply of gas in mystery. Total opaqueness. Where are our priorities? Where does this president think that this country will be if he plays politics with our energy? If PPPs, private power producers, that generate a portion of our electricity are still being allowed to supply electricity in the face of the rains that we have with overflowing dams, where we should be generating our cheap hydroelectric power, but we are not, for whatever reason, the president is not out there exempling or showing us that this is the way to go. Which is the CS4 Energy that has come out to hold a press conference and told us, oh, ye Kenyan people, this is a roadmap. In the event the Strait of Hormuz scenario does not resolve in the near future or in the short run, this is where we will be. And this is what you need to do. If we need to conserve fuel, who are the prioritized bodies? Or will ambulance have the first priority, then the police, and so on and so forth? What is the executive doing to cut down on their use of energy, for instance, fuel, the fuel guzzlers that they're using? I mean, we're seeing the normal life going on, like there is no crisis and there is no nothing. Believe you me, in the short term coming there, we will have maybe by the 15th of April, a hike in the price of fuel, which will have a domino effect on transportation all over. And what will that do to the economy? If you hike the price of fuel by just a thin margin, I'm afraid a lot of Kenyans who are just living by, the threadbare sort of existence, will ground their vehicles. Whatever income that the government has targeted to generate from that fuel levy, it will not be forthcoming. And what will that do? It will ground the supply chain. And I repeat that deliberately. Because you ask, what are our options? The government is not cutting down on the fuel usage. They have long institutions at all. And in fact, this president had said during the COP26 meeting that was in this country, we have all these alternatives to energy, reliance on petrochemicals, petrofuels, and fossil fuels, and the like they call it, fossil fuels, you know. And he drove in an electric.
Yes.
No, that was just for showmanship. He doesn't believe in it. He does not believe in it. Because if he did believe in it, he would have asked the importation or the manufacturer locally of those vehicles. When have you seen him drive that car again? Where have you seen him demanding as a policy that all institutions under him in the executive should have those EVs?
But looking at the Business Daily, we can see a boon for EV dealers. The state orders 600 units.
600 units?
600 units?
600 units?
Yes, it says 600 units here.
That's a joke.
But
if you really want a solution.
Isn't it a beginning?
It's a beginning. About COP26
isn't it a beginning?
How many years ago? COP26, and he was there presiding over it and showing us that he's going to drive.
Do you mean there are no electric
car.
vehicles bought between that period?
But I'm saying the EVs are not the solution. The EVs are not the solution. Let me remind the Kenyan people, the real target of these Iranian Israeli-American war is the controlled demolition of capitalism. The controlled demolition of capitalism will mean that you, the average Kenyan, does not access your market, and you will be subjected to take it or leave it, you will be subjected to energy lockdowns because of the shortage of fuel. The situation in the Gulf is going to escalate for two reasons. Number one, there is a determination to collapse capitalism. And the only way you can do it worldwide is through cutting off this energy supply chain. And if it is cut off, including the production, why would Israel bomb the facility of the largest oil producing facility in Iran? Why would you do that? And then you hear WHO, Shedros says that, the environmental damage that is being caused by this sort of the fuel burning and all of that is humongous. It's going to trigger diseases and so on and so forth. Why would they do that if indeed they wanted, quote unquote, to annihilate Iran? Aren't there better ways of doing it? First of all, we have been told by Trump, this is a regime change that he was going for. But beyond the regime change, what are we seeing? The oil is the target as a primary energy driver of capitalism. And once that happens, believe you me, you can do nothing if you do not organize yourselves. And I go back to the issue. My pain and disappointment is that the African Union has become just a shop talk and nothing else. Instead of finding solutions for the African continent, for the energy crisis that we're actually accosted by, we're going into, they are out there doing it. It's no surprise. The United Nations Resolution 2803 that appointed the so-called peace board was passed without any African participation. In fact, if you go into the United Nations website, you look for that resolution 2803 that was passed, appointing the peace board. It is not in the Kiswahili language. It is in every other language, but it's not in the Kiswahili language. What am I saying? Africans are just being bypassed. They are watching their future and their destiny being mapped and told, given by some unelected people, especially in the World Economic Forum. Our energy policy ought to be well articulated and shielded from these external attacks. But what are we seeing? A government that is sitting by with absolutely no roadmap.
All right. But I think there's a roadmap here when you're talking about
EV cars. EV cars. Do they have fueling stations?
That's the way to go.
Do they have
that's the way to go.
No.
We can try also and tap into the geothermal energy that we do have in this country. I think even from the 1950s.
But may I clarify something?
Heightened as the
EV cars are not the solution. The EV cars are not the solution. EV cars.
You were talking about austerity measures, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. But let me finish
we see
that.
Something really happening right now where with the fuel guzzlers that we are having, especially in the government institutions, can they really pay back on that so that they cannot try and show Kenyans, at least we are trying to tighten our nooses as it is over our belts in the reality of what is really happening,
Allow me to
we are
finish
going the EV way,
Yes.
maybe now, in the meantime, to try and, stanch the flow of the issue that is really affecting us, being the fuel
Let me just say this
scarcity
one
that is here.
EV cars are not the solution, at least the long-term solution. EV cars are not.
We're talking about a bandit
look at the cost,
solution right
look
now.
at the cost benefit.
Yes,
Look at
before
the
we
cost
go to
benefit.
yes.
The cost benefit, look at those batteries that are produced, and look at the children that are mining the Congo. The United Nations is blind and silent to it. And if we say that we need EV cars, where there's infrastructure to do it. And so while you're going to be feeling that, and we're having power rationing. And I go back to the same issue, but it's very disturbing. Why are PPPs, private power producers, still at it? Mbote, what do they rely on to produce power again? PPPs?
Fuel.
PPPs?
Diesel.
All right, let's hear from Rachel on this. You can try and butt in.
It's called Kinyanjui. Now, I think Kinyanjui, you maybe I feel you missed the point if you asked about the alternatives that we can give the government to mitigate this whole issue around the oil and the possible shortage looming maybe in another 4 or so months. One, I think the government has come. I'm not the government spokesman. Stop looking at me like that. But I know, and I'm not speaking on behalf of the government either. But I think because I'm a policy person, if the policy structures are put in place and everything else is in order, then there's no need of me to fight it. So I'm not going to fight just because I'm seated here and there's need for me to fight. But however, one is that what is the government doing? That is what we should ask ourselves. What is the government doing? I started by stating, one is that they've actually okayed the ministry to look and explore other alternative supply mechanisms out of the G2G framework. I think that we should be happier. I'm not saying in it you're supposed to bring substandard oil, but that is a move in the right direction. When it comes to policy, what do you want us to do? Mm-hmm. The government, we will task the ministry. Have you sought for a waiver out of the G2G framework? That has happened. So that is a move in the right direction for me as a policy person. Mm-hmm. Secondly, we are talking about if the main place, and Mbote spoke about it, and I'm glad that you are in that space of oil and all that kind of stuff. But then, what then should the government do? It is just not about the Kenyan government. Mm-hmm. It is about now African Union. It's about East Africa. What infrastructure do we put in place to ensure that the oil in Libya, the oil in Angola, the oil in Nigeria can reach Kenya? If today the war escalates to a point that we are not able to access oil completely, then what happens to this larger market called Africa? And you spoke about it. So the alternative is there a way that the infrastructure that they keep talking about within East Africa, the oil pipeline, I want to believe from Tanzania to maybe up to Congo or those other places through Uganda, if that can be done, then those are the director or the policy directives that we should be speaking about. What alternatives are there for us? What options do we give the government to pursue? Not just castigating the government, you've not done this, and we're not also giving them alternatives. I mean, that's what I'm trying to say. As a person who is in that area, what alternatives do you give the government and say, for me, for us to mitigate this, these are the stopgap measures that we are going to explore. So for me, one, I'm happy that there is a way that the government can move away from the G2G framework and even explore other alternatives within Africa or other regions, including India. Right. But that does not mean we are supposed to import or allow any substandard fuel within the country. And where that happens, then can they tell us how are they mitigating? What were they going to refine it further to reduce the sulfur in it, or what were they intending to do with that kind? Remember, they say there was 63 that was already come, there's another 63 waiting. So then what is going to happen to the other one? So those are the things that we should be speaking to, not just saying the government has not done something, but what is this that we are offering as an alternative to the government to mitigate the issue?
Right. But what if I may ask, because I think also we had something in Turkana
Yes.
Yes.
And we didn't, everyone was very hopeful, optimistic. Finally, we've dug, a gold mine, so to speak, that is going to change this country completely. But we've never been told what with the pilot phase that we had, of course, from Turkana, what oil really came. We heard that it was not really commercial viable. It could not meet up the standard. Were there any dynamics from international players, to try and undermine the quality of oil? Now that this is really right up your alley, maybe you can explain it to us, because we expended a lot of money. We had investments here, right? But Kenyans have not been told since then what really became of this huge turnkey project for the country.
Well, thank you, and I think that was actually what I wanted to comment about.
Okay.
But I need to put some clarity in regards to how this operates and how this works. First and foremost, Kenya as a country did not spend any money onto this. So, because the way it works is that an exploration company is actually given a license to do an exploration at their own cost. So Kenya is subdivided into various what we call exploration blocks. So basically is that at that particular moment in time, Tullow Oil, which is a British company, in conjunction with a company called African Oil, came in and took the blocks within the Turkana area, 14B, 14C and all that. And they were able to discover. And our exploration has 3 steps. It has what we call the seismic operations, and then after that you have to come and do what we call the exploration drilling. And once you struck oil in one of your wells, like now what we popularly know as Gamia 1, you have to do what we call the appraisal drilling now to be able to determine the length or the depth or the spread in which you can be able to extract oil. So first and foremost, we need to acknowledge the fact that Kenya is an oil company. We are supposed to be an oil producing company. But look at something we call the African mentality. And I wanted to respond that. And, when...
we're supposed to be... No. Before we even go on. We are supposed to be an oil-producing company.
We are supposed to be an oil-producing
So our oil is commercially viable.
It is absolutely commercially
viable. So are we misled that it was not commercially viable?
We were never told it is not commercially viable.
That was the report.
That was the report.
That was the report.
Hold on. Let me actually now tell you. And I don't know whose report you're referring to. Because apparently before President Uhuru Kenyatta left office, there was an operation we called EOPS, what we used to call an early oil production operation, which actually tracked oil, what we call crude oil, from Turkana to Mombasa.
2.5 billion.
Yes,
worth.
And that particular ship left and went into the international market and sold Kenyan oil, which was actually sold at auction, and China bought it. At that particular moment, it was actually supposed to test that our oil can actually be bought and all that, what we call the commercial viability of the oil you're producing, which goes into a lot of depth in terms of analytic, data analytics, in terms of the DNA and what you can be able to refine with your crude oil. So to speak fast forward, what was supposed to happen is that a company, the oil company Tullow, was actually supposed to have what we call an FID signed off by the government, what we call the final investment decision signed off by the government. This is actually a document that actually guarantees them recovery of their investment, because this is where now you give you a detailed expenditure of your entire oil exploration, which is an extremely expensive affair. You spend billions of dollars to be able to do that, because apparently you'll be paying an oil rig. We had about 5 drilling rigs, one from France, we had an oil from UK, we had an oil from US, we had a company from Egypt, and all those. All those were actually drilling companies that were being contracted by Tullow. So now you have oil in Turkana, but there are 2 main things you need to do. You need to give the investor, the explorer, you need to sign off his cost, because there is something we call the sharing formula, what we call now the proceed sharing formula, which means now they need to be recovering their money as you continue selling, but the government need to start making money at the same time. And that is where what we call the Mining Act was actually fastened, and it was signed, and Kenyanju will tell you about it, because the Turkana as a community started demanding a share of their oil and said, hey, hold on a minute. We need to have a share of this. That's where the national government taking 70%, the county government taking 20%, and the host community in Lokicha and around and Gomo and other areas is taking their 10% share. Perfect.
Was it 10%?
So
5%? It was 10%.
It was actually 10%, 10% of what you call the host community.
Yeah.
So if you look at it, there has been proper development of that particular field in terms of whatever. But when this government, the government of Lecho, came into power, I will not go into details, but
Lecho Omolo, you to be very particular, not the first lady.
What are they calling it? What government again? I mean, I don't know.
Bread-based.
Bread-based government, yes. When the bread-based government came into power, apparently they never signed up the FID. The FID was never signed.
You try to say that
which means, yeah, it was never signed.
They don't like it.
Which means now that is exactly why we stagnated. But as we speak right now, a lot of transactions have taken place. I don't hold a position to be able to explain, but I need to explain something. It has taken place and Talo has been taken over. So apparently as we speak, that is water under the bridge, and actually it's going to start. The exploration is going to start.
But was Talo also tax exempted?
Well, there is a lot of tax rebates that actually comes with exploration. Yes, it is. But you see, what they doubted...
They also pay, because there's a huge question also on Talo with the tax... it's not even evasion scandals that are around. You are alive to it.
Yes, I was alive to it. And
not just here,
I will tell
also globally.
I will tell you this. If there's a compliant company that you would find, is actually some of these exploration companies, because Talo is a listed company in the London Stock Exchange, and some of those particular, malfunction can actually devalue their shares in a very big way in the London Stock Exchange. So they will not joke with such kind of things, and that's why they are able to actually discount such an operation, such an expenditure, and actually sell off that stake and be able to proceed to another destination for their exploration, because they still have to be in business. You know, Talo is very huge in Ghana, offshore oil. You know, as an African outfit, that's a very successful, part of Talo venture. So they had absolutely no problems with how they manage their tax systems, because I was there, and I can tell you I was in that operation 100%. So, and they actually got all they needed from government in terms of tax exemptions, tax holidays, tax rebates and all that. And they were able to pay what they were able to pay. Actually, as a subcontractor, as somebody who gives services to Talo, you had absolutely no way of even avoiding paying tax, because one of the qualifications of you being able to work and operate with Talo is that you had to be 100% what we call tax compliance. So that one is something that they don't joke around with, because obviously they are also subjected into the laws of in England. But I wanted to talk about something very small about what I would call the African mentality. I mean, Dibar and the rest of the panel. Can you look at this scenario? And I want you to carefully study this scenario and see how sometimes Africans we miss at the biggest opportunity there is. Are you aware that Kenya as a country, for the wisdom of those who came before us, had a refinery, an operating refinery, that have since been condemned in Mombasa? Mm-hmm. This had happened long before we had discovered oil in Kenya. Imagine a situation where, without mismanagement and running down of government, that particular refinery was still operational. The only thing that is operational within that refinery in Mombasa is actually something called the storage tanks, because that is where the crude oil is being stored when it goes to Mombasa before it's pumped into the ship. So I want you to imagine, Lecho, a situation where that refinery is operational. By now, Kenya would actually be defining its own oil. And we won't be having a problem of over-relying with this ship that are stuck due wire and then others that are coming in. So basically, we have had an African leadership that have been completely catastrophic to its citizens. People who do not actually plan. If you go to Dubai, there's something we call the Museum of the Future. These are gentlemen who have sat down and started discussing about 2100. Is it 2100 or whatever? They are planning 70 years from now. We have dudes here who even found a Kibaki Vision 2030 that they even forgot. They can't even find those papers and those particular plans where Professor Ngumi and the likes had even planned.
They have a bottom up. Yeah. They have a bottom up.
A bottom up that doesn't work at all. All I'm trying to tell
They're going to Singapore.
is that the biggest letdown of the African community is the leadership they have been erecting to the positions of power. People with absolutely no idea and no interest of the whatever. Look at what happened to us. We had a fantastic project called the Rapset. which was supposed to be a combination of 4 African countries, Southern Sudan, Ethiopia, Kenya, and Uganda. Actually, Kibaki had signed off that particular project. This was a huge infrastructural development project that was actually developing an entirely new port in Ramu that was supposed to be dedicated to oil refinery. And all the oil from Southern Sudan, all the oils from Uganda, and the oil from Kenya was entirely supposed to be directed to Lamu for refinery and re-export thereof. But most importantly, for our own local market. Look at what happened. They started pulling out one by one. We have an old man in Uganda called Museveni. He even had to take a reroute of his own pipeline because they have more oil than us, and went through Tanzania, which is under construction right now, which is about 4 times longer, 4 times expensive because of geopolitical things here. And they start talking about our RAD tender system in Uganda. They are giving land for free. I'm very sad because the person who negotiated that deal out of Kenya is my friend. He's an ambassador in Tanzania who I always quarrel whenever we meet with him because I told him, you misread an entire country by letting them spend so much money, and we do not know what will happen eventually, whether they will come a presidency in Tanzania.
All right, we need to close this so that we can focus also on the party politics.
In conclusion on matters as well, I would say oil is a driving factor of every economy. And when you have leadership that does not even look at EV, for example, as an option and as a future, because we have a lot of EV manufacturing companies that have already expressed interest to come into Kenya to manufacture from here, especially within the Olkaria area, where they can be able to access cheaper power options because of the robotic nature of producing an EV car. We need to have a government and people who cares and plans for the future.
Right. Let's just close up on the fuel saga and just move on as well. I don't know if you've got the final remarks on the issue. Yes. Now that we have this particular, we know, still investigation ongoing, we are yet to see, and if we plumb deeper, what is really at stake as well.
I think I agree entirely with what has said. And if you look at the missed opportunities, it pains you as a Kenyan to see that the lack of leadership has been the bane of our society. And you have leaders that are full of greed, possessed by demons of greed. And they just wallow in that greed, and they think that, wallowing in that greed is something that is to be celebrated. And they are out there on the display, shameless display of their opulence on a daily basis. And the president, aware of the crisis that we're about to just plunge into as a nation, he's out there with his entourage of all these fuel guzzlers. It really pains you to see that, look, you tell him, take advice. Whoever is advising you wrongly. Nobody wants to oust you. You have a 5-year tenure at least, and if you can convince the Kenyan people, then he's so absorbed into this hypnotic, sort of scenario. We have to take him up for what? For what? We have an energy crisis we are staring at. And I'm afraid to tell the Nairobian people, the Nairobians especially, you will soon be falling back on charcoal. Take it or leave it. I'm sorry, I don't want to be alarmist.
All right, okay.
But it is where we are headed to. No. Let me finish that point, Debar. Because of the shortchanging we are having in terms of leadership. And what do I mean? We are having now adulterated fuel, risky out there, that will damage our vehicles because of these poor decisions, this poor leadership. And like Mbote has said, that there was going to be even these lapses all the way up to Central Africa, and Central Africa produces a lot of gas, and we would have benefited from that. We now cannot benefit. Now it's a bit too late. And let me say this. The conflict that has resulted in the Strait of Hormuz being closed is going to escalate. Donald Trump, the day before yesterday, I think was yesterday, was the day before yesterday, he said he's going to annihilate, wipe out Iran. What is he talking about? A nuclear bomb? If it's a nuclear bomb, then it shows you that it's going to escalate. And on top of that, we had the closure of the Al-Aqsa mosque by the Israeli government, which is set to be open on the 14th of April. Now, there are those who are saying, and some imams, in fact, are saying that, well, it is going to be a controlled demolition, and you will have a bomb, launched by Israel, coming over in the name of Iran and destroying that mosque. That has religious connotations.
Indeed.
And ramifications.
Indeed.
Which is what I'm saying. If
So
you're
it's
hoping,
spin off also to a religious
absolutely,
war.
absolutely.
Yeah.
The third, you're staring at the Third World War. Take it or leave it. You may call me whatever you want, but you're looking at that because of the escalation. Because the moment you hit those ships, the moment you hit those reservoirs of oil that Iran had kept, and they are now retaliating, going on to the Emirates, and being hit as well, likely is Syria and the like. So this enmeshment of geopolitics with our own energy scenario is something that is calling for sober approaches. And I'm afraid our government is sunk into this short-term, myopic resolution of the issue, and they have lost sight of the need to have a long-term resolution to it. And I'm afraid with the change of the digital currency and the digital economy, then the bombing that the Iranians have said that they will target Amazon, they will target Google, they target Meta. What are you talking about? Telecommunications will be crippled. Are we ready or prepared for that? When you railroad everything into the e-platform, and Iran has said, in uncertain terms, you can find it on the online, our target will be your major data corporations. And what does that mean for the Kenyan nation? Which is what I'm saying, we have to be realistic. If Meta is hit, what are you telling anybody who accesses government information through Facebook or the WhatsApp communication? It is going to be crippled. They have a backup plan. We do not have a backup plan. So in the long term, we need to have sober solutions. What do we have? Mbote has said about the failed African leadership. What we have are puppets of the very same perpetrators of what is happening.
All right.
Lastly.
But it's not all gloom and doom.
It's not, but I'm saying, but you need to be realistic.
But we need to ask ourselves,
yes.
Maybe it also give us a moment, a hinge moment, Rachel, for us to reflect as a country on how, yes, we're tapping our energy solutions. How has it been in the growth as it is? Because I was reading, and I like going back to this particular article in African Business. I think the publication was in 2023 or 2024 there. And it says, indeed, it was focusing on the geothermal energy of Kenya by then. And it says, indeed, Kenya first started to explore its geothermal potential as far back as the 1950s. But the sector only really took off from the late 1990s onwards as the country looked for a way to combat electricity supply problems stemming from an over-reliance on hydropower. Kenya now has the 8th largest geothermal production capacity in the world at around 950 megawatts. And that has been also inching up, isn't it? This makes up almost half the country's electricity generation. You know, I was trying to read this and I'm trying to look at the reality here, and I'm wondering if we can maybe invest heavily into this. And you were the one who was saying, oh, look at what President Ruto was trying to do with the climate action plan that he has for the country.
Yeah.
I mean, didn't we see investors really coming to actually try and prop up this geothermal energy?
The
Black Rocks.
Where's the cut? Where's the cut?
We don't really know.
Where's the cut for them?
Yeah, but
Geothermal, there's no cut for them, so they will not invest a penny.
What do you mean?
Oh, unless they go now for the 10%
amongst the
for the
10
investor.
countries. No, among the
Rachel,
among the 10 countries
yes.
that BlackRock chose, and you know BlackRock is a huge investment entity. They chose Kenya to try and, of course, invest here to prop up the geothermal. Of course, there are interests. I'm not blind to that particular fact. You cannot just use as an investor. But can we maybe concentrate on what we've been endowed with God, with the geothermal, to try and spur energy,
if we had leadership.
Can we hear from Rachel, then we'll come to you.
Yeah, okay.
I think it's, in all fairness, this points out to a very open discussion and openness in our country. What the challenge that has bedeviled this country is one of bureaucracy. That we know many investors fear investing in Kenya just because of that. But if that can be dealt with, then I don't see why Kenya should not position itself. We have seen what is happening at Olkaria, and I think that's one of the reasons why even those black, I don't know what investors, are trying to come to Kenya. BlackRock, yes. Trying to come to Kenya to invest in that particular area. And if we can also move from hydro even to geothermal, it will save us more and even lower the cost of production for our fuel, for our every other thing in this country, literally. Because one, when we move to geothermal, we are not investing more when in terms of how do we produce the geothermal power. Then how do we transfer this power into our usage? I want to believe it's a cheaper way. That's why we are trying to move away from hydro, which majorly rely on fuel to be produced. So I don't want to look at it like we are, every time Kenya is a place known for corruption, that where is my card for us to be able to invest, for me to be able to give you the license. And that's why I'm talking about the bureaucracies. Can we deal with the bureaucracies in this country? Where if an investor wants, make it easy for them to invest so that many other players can come into this space. We are talking about the LAPSET. And Mbote here earlier on spoke about Talo, the FID not being signed up.
Yes.
But I want to believe that Talo Oil actually ceded all its stakes to Gulf Energy last year. And I want to believe...
Under duress?
No, that is what you say.
Just say sold.
Yeah, yes. Okay, it sold all the stakes to that. So why do you say that that was never signed? There must have been another agreement that must have been signed. That's why Gulf Energy...
But it's a conflict. Look, Gulf Energy then gets to G...
So don't say, just because you're not aware, don't say that was not done.
But Gulf Energy
why didn't you tell
is in a state of conflict.
No.
How can they mine our own oil? How can they refine
that
our
does
oil
not
when
stop.
they are into
No,
the G to G?
that does not mean that the procedure was not done. Just because there's conflict, it doesn't stop.
The point is now that a scheme...
No, does it stop what you did because there's war today? Whatever was done last year has stopped just because there's war today? No, that is misleading.
You are the point of corruption.
No, that is misleading.
It's not misleading to say...
It is misleading.
That, look, if you have a
it
company
is misleading.
that is supposed to be in...
Because it appears like though, because Tulo sold everything, so there's nothing happening.
At least
in Lokicha. No, there's much happening in Lokicha.
Have they
Gulf Energy took over. I don't know whether they're already mining, but they took over. Maybe they're under the process of...
There's a lot happening
yes,
now.
There's a lot happening. So you cannot say there's nothing happening in Lokicha just because Tulo... No, you insinuated.
No, I didn't.
That's why I'm actually bringing this correction.
They have taken over.
Yeah. No, you've just said that now. You've just said that now.
No, I said it.
No, initially you didn't even mention Gulf Energy.
I hope we had Hansards here. You can go and review the video.
You did. I'm very keen. I wrote it down because I wrote it down. I wanted just to pick it up with
you. Not what you wrote is what I said.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I'm listening. But I think in all fairness, there's something that the government is doing.
Yes.
First of all, we have seen for some period now, even just mere energy that you use in your house, there's stability in that sector. So we cannot largely say there's nothing being done in regards to the energy sector. There's nothing being done in regard to this particular sector.
And you're right, of course, in comparison to South Africa, even Nigeria here,
and even
with their
with our
oil,
challenges.
by the way.
I saw
They've been having challenges with power, isn't it? With the power rationing.
Everyone has, including South
Sometimes
Africa.
It's
still my time.
Rachel, I'm with you. Sometimes, I'm with you. Sometimes we can be so lamenting as a country. We can actually make the perfect cover book, right? Or a cover page for the Book of Lamentations as Kenyans, right? But there are good things happening.
Yeah, and let's
when it comes to
appreciate
energy
those small gains.
And you'll agree with me, Wakil. What has happened with ESCOM in South Africa, biggest, you can see the water scarcity, the power rationing that has been going on.
We need to separate the two things.
She'd finish?
Let me finish, Bote, and then you'll just talk.
Yes.
So I think it is not really right and fair for us to always keep castigating the government. Even those small gains, they are what has led us to where we are today. When we are hearing of us being number 8 in the whole world. It's not a mean achievement. It's not a mean achievement.
No. Let's talk about reserves. No.
No. Just listen. I'm coming to that.
No.
I'm coming to that.
Okay.
But then,
investment.
just listen. Then what can we do
Yeah.
now to spur investment? Now that we've been position number 8, what is this that we can do differently?
The potential
You get-
for geothermal
what other potentials
is at
do we
number 8,
have? Yes.
as opposed to the investment into
So
it.
then that's why I'm talking about bureaucracy. Then what can we do
All right.
to allow investment to thrive
Okay.
in
Thank you,
this
thank you,
particular
thank you,
space,
thank you.
Kinyanjui?
Right.
So we cannot just say, no, nothing is being done. Oh, the government is ABCD. Tell the government, yes, you've been position number 8 in geothermal space. But then what are you doing in that space to spur investment?
All right.
Okay.
What
Right,
can you do
And we
differently?
also, Rachel, we need to be alive to the fact, even Dangote was here.
Yes,
I
he
think,
came.
was it 6-8 years back?
Yeah.
And he was seeking to come and invest, a clinker, machinery here
West Pokot.
in West Pokot.
On cement.
Yeah, on cements.
Yes.
And we've seen the cement sector, the taxation that came with it. People have been decrying. We have a real estate which is really booming.